Hello and welcome back to another episode of Explosive Colonization. To start us off here, we are just sorting out some orbits. We are now moving the station, the scrap heap station, from the orbit of Kerbal out to minmus. This is the first step in creating basically 3 ships. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going to do this in 2 stages because of how big the station is, how heavy the station. I've used most of the materials inside it, there's only a little bit of rocket parts left, and the last ship that was created, which you can see on the left of the screen there, was my fuel carrier, and I'm using the engine from that as well. So I've just docked it on, and that's given me an extra push. And all I'm doing is I'm making half the burn. As you can see there, I've only gone through sort of half the way, so that I can return back round to the lowest point, to the periapse, and make a second burn. Now, part of the reason for this is because I was overheating. So as you can see here, I've just built, using some of the equipment, some of the material kit, sorry, I've just built some more radiators and I attached a few on there. It wasn't just 2, I attached a few more. And then we've made the second stage of the burn, and we have an intercept with minmus. So while this is going on, I set a little ship to build. I just need a little sort of lander from the station down to the planet. So using Wild Blue Industries, specifically the Buffalo mod, I create this little lander. So it's just a monopropellant tug, not really a heavy duty tug, it's just built for getting people down to the surface and moving a little bit of materials about using the Kerbal inventory system. So here you go, just a little bit of a show off. Nothing much, just a tiny little tug, big docking, not big, medium docking port at the back, some landing gear and a little grappler there you can see. So this is just a simple enough tug, as I say, for getting people down to the surface and doing anything that's required really. It's just a little basic one. There's the solar panel on the bottom because there's standard solar panels on the top, and this just gives me a better chance of charging. The last thing you want is to be facing the wrong way and run out of charge. So here I'm just setting to build one of my other ships. This is going to be my liquid hydrogen transport that brings liquid hydrogen up from minmus. Now I haven't actually sorted that base out yet, but this is just getting the transport using the rest of the rocket parts. Now this will not be ready, it still needs more rocket parts from the ground on minmus, which are already being produced there. So this is just starting the ball rolling for once I get the intercept, and here you can just see me decelerating into the orbit, and then just disconnecting our carrier, our liquid hydrogen carrier. It's also a bit of a rescue ship, but I'll go into that in more detail in a second. And then again, a little bit more modifications. The biggest issue I'm having is heat, and I don't want to run the risk of anything exploding, so I've created some more radiators. I actually started these when I was just coming out of Kerbal, and 1 or 2 of them was ready, so this is just the little kiss add-on. So obviously they're too big for Kerbal to handle on their own, so I'm using one of the containers that can be mounted on your back and just taking them down one at a time using the container, which makes things a little bit easier, and it makes it very interesting. I quite enjoy the Kerbal inventory system and the attachment system. It's a very underrated mod. Most people use it in the system, but you don't really see it in videos, with the exception of 1 or 2 parts, and I'm really enjoying having a lot of things on it. So here we're just setting our orbit for the fuel carrier. It has the minimum amount that I could sort of get away with for the generator of the enriched uranium, so it needs to come back to Kerbal and get refueled basically. I think it's got about a year's worth, where it can carry a lot more than that. So, quickly, I just drop over to my past self to explain a couple of things that I did sort of live. I thought it was a better explanation. So I figured I'd do a little bit of explanation on this ship and at the same time show you, well, exactly how painful it is to fly. But it also explains a bit of the DSEV mod, at least the engine, which is my absolute favourite thing about this mod. The rest of it's great and I use a lot of it, but I figured I would show this sort of live because this ship is almost entirely DSEV with the exception of the reactor, which comes from Nairty's near future electrical pack. Cylindrical tanks here are part of the cryofuels tanks. Again, one of Nairty's. Whereas this centre section here, with the exception of the actual modules on the outside and these little glycerol, the actual centre section is again DSEV. It's the cryopod that comes with that. These are the cryopods that come with the actual cryo mod, and then your truss and your tanks here, which I've got connected through little docking ports, are all again DSEV from Angel 120 on the forums, and this is actually part of the heat mod from Nairty, these radiators. It's something I have a bit of a problem with. And just to show you very quickly, if I turn on the RCS, these RCS pods are again from the DSEV. They use liquid hydrogen and electricity, and if I actually bring this up when I pulse, my reactor's sat too high at the moment. If I just drop down how much the reactor's making, you can see here how much they actually use when you're pulsing them. So they do require quite a bit of electricity to run, but they run on a liquid hydrogen, so it makes it nice and simple. Now this engine, which is the interesting part, so this engine requires liquid hydrogen and fusion pellets. You require fusion pellets to run the engine. It technically has two modes, well, not technically, it does have two modes, but it runs on liquid hydrogen, but it needs fusion pellets as its power, essentially. And when you turn it on, if you saw there a minute ago, it actually has to charge up, so you can't turn it on immediately. It takes a bit of time. With the problems with TAC life support at the moment, I have to be very careful it doesn't kill any of my Kerbals, because it will drain. I think it requires 48,000 electricity to start up, and it takes a time to build up its charge, and then once it's running it actually produces electricity. If it is on, it will eat fusion pellets, so you want to turn it on, turn it off, unless you're using it as its own little generator, which is not something I'm doing. It has a good thrust to weight ratio. Obviously I'm using this for a lot of large ships, so for me its thrust to weight ratio here, although it says 0.51, it's still, I think you can actually see around about here, it's got 1800 kilonewtons of thrust, so it is a good engine, and it is scalable. There's a tweak scale patch that I actually was the one that asked for it, and yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. It's fully working, so that you make it bigger, you get a lot more thrust, but munchies more stuff. And yeah, I just thought I'd explain this because I haven't really seen it explained in the forums, and I love it. It is part of most of my big ships, if not all of them. At the moment, this is the style I seem to be building an awful lot of, and this particular ship is essentially my rescue ship. So it has, as you can see here, a lot of cryopods, so it can pick people up and just put them in storage and bring them back. The life support that it's actually carrying is, well, for the current crew, is 43 years worth. So it can fill up a good amount and then carry extras and just bring them back for wherever. And as you can see, it's got 60,000 meters per second of delta V. Another reason why I like this mod specifically, DSEV mod, when it ties into TAC life support, because it gives you an interesting little Oh, that was a bit too low. It gives you an interesting little thing that you can do. Now, what you can do, if you run out of fuel, which has happened to me before, I ran out of LH2, the second mode on this engine requires the fusion pellets to be burned for fuel, but it also requires water for cooling. So it requires those two resources, which means that in an emergency, you can actually burn part of your life support to get you to stop. Now, I realised this when I was still playing with USI Life Support, which again is a brilliant life support program, but I came up with this idea that it would be better because I overshot something on one of my playthroughs. And since I've changed it, there has actually been 2 occasions where I have gone to overshoot something, usually coming back to Kerbal, and I've run out of Delta V because it's a big ship and I haven't quite managed my points good enough. Because I'm not a brilliant pilot. And yeah, so you switch over to your, essentially to burning part of your life support to manage, which I think is just a brilliant interaction between the 2 mods. So yeah, this is my little explanation of this ship. As you can see, it is a big heavy ship and it takes quite a while to do things. Don't think you quite get the amount of time spent on manoeuvres with some of the bigger things that I did, so I thought I'd just slot this in the middle a little bit live and show you how long it takes to do things. So, a bit more of a live explanation. I jumped here to sort some stuff out, so I thought I would continue with this explanation. So this is Tent City. This is my rocket parts producing base. It is not brilliantly efficient because this is the first time, well, it's not the first time I've used the Pathfinder mod now. Although actually technically this would be considered the first time because this specific base was the first real one that I built. But I've sort of reconfigured it now because it seemed a waste to put all these tents up here. But I've reconfigured it now so that it's done like this. So that it's just producing rocket parts. It's producing a bit of fuel as well. Rocket parts aren't the only thing that it produces, but it's mainly rocket parts and essentially enough fuel for the docking procedures. So to get the ships into the air, and this core overheat issue is, I'm sure somebody on the forums will be able to tell me what this is. But it's constantly coming up, I don't know why. And so, still got some survey stakes here because of what I'm doing. But essentially I've set this up, and as you've seen before, I've set this entire base up through KISS. It was delivered on a rocket, all unpacks, and this has all been set up through KISS. And I gotta admit, I am really liking the way it looks at the moment. The only bit that wasn't was this little section here, which was a built section and connected on, which was designed in the VAB. The SPA, sorry, Spaceplane Hangar. But the entire method being that I have these little transport ships. So this middle fuel tank, which is part of the SSTU mod, carries rocket parts, and then we have some fuel at the bottom, and that's not enough fuel. But yes, so what we do with it, ink up our spacecraft, and essentially we fuel up the spacecraft, give them rocket parts, and then they go up to the main station, which essentially means that I can build rockets in space that don't cost me anything. So all of my ship manufacturing, although it's still designed on Kerbal, it doesn't cost me any credits to get anything into space at all. So this is the entire plan behind this. Yeah, so this is what I plan. So I'll just jump to fast forward time and show you everything getting ready. So back in the future, we're just watching this at 4 times speed, and we're lifting off and just sending a ship up with the rocket parts. Now, one thing I forgot was that I'd actually removed the monopropellant canisters, so all I had was in the main the main command section. After several hours of trying to get this thing docked, I managed to do it, but there are little bits of equipment all over the place, and I've pretty much drained all of my monopropellant out of the station, which is a bit of a problem. And essentially this ship is a bit redundant, so I'm thinking of just retiring it. So for the moment, I'm just knocking it down to a lower orbit, so that once it gets close enough to be able to come back down to the base, I'll land it there. But I have a few other things to do in the meantime. So here in the meantime, we are decelerating at Kerbal. So we've brought the LH2 freighter back to Kerbal, and I'm just closing off some of the fuel tanks so that nothing gets used by accident. Now we need to we need to refuel the reactor. So I've built this craft. Now this is an extension of one of the planes I've been messing about with at Skunkworks. And in the midst of it, I have a little setup that I'm calling a bootstrap, which is just some solar panels and some uranium, and it'll get everything up and running, and it'll power the ship while the reactor's off. And there we go. It detonates when we try and release it. So I have a bit of a problem here, and I send out one of my little Kerbals to try and get things sorted, and I forget, I time warp, and yeah, detonation. So we head over to the piece of the wreckage that actually holds some of the reactor fuel to see if we can grab it. Unfortunately, having done this at the wrong time, I didn't realise how big the container is, and there is no way that I can get the container. So I grabbed this solar panel just in case. It's pretty much all I can lift, and I head back, which costs me a lot of EVA fuel. And lucky I got back in time. So this is where we are at the moment. We have a ship, a space plane with no real wings. So let's see what happens next time. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.